lectures that I've been able to enjoy. I'd like to open by offering gratitude to my teachers. First and foremost, my beloved Guruji, Sri Swami Sachidananda. Secondly, my most beautiful teacher, Shivakami. My most esteemed friend and peer, Renata. And all the teachers here that have come through to Hong Kong, through the international conferences of the past, and my beautiful global Sangha. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me today. I have prepared a small presentation, so I just want to make sure that I can share my screen. Are you all okay to see that?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. So today's talk is a little bit about sharing yoga for the special child for disadvantaged communities in Hong Kong. And one thing I know from a lot of the yoga for the special child practitioners and new graduates, when we bring yoga for the special child out into the world, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, there is a little bit of a tricky navigation that the new practitioners go through, which is working with a child that comes to you, because almost always after graduating from a Yoga for the Special Child program, a child will reveal themselves to you, and that's the child you go to work with. But when working with disadvantaged communities, there's a trick to balancing serving the communities that need it the most while being able to look after yourself. One of my greatest teachings was that you can't pour from an empty cup. And so you have to be full, not only through your own personal practices, but also when it comes to charging. Now, bringing yoga for the special child to the most disadvantaged communities was tricky because they could not afford the cost of service. And so I'm going to take you on a journey of how we tackled this from a very practical perspective, in the hopes that maybe if you are looking at bringing yoga for the special child into disadvantaged communities in your area, maybe this will offer some guidance to be able to share it on a wider basis. So YAMA Foundation is a very small charity that I started, and it brings yoga, art, and meditation to underserved communities in Hong Kong. YAMA actually stands for Yoga, Art, and Meditation. And this charity is a legacy of our lineage, what I've learned from all my teachers and my gurus, which is that all people have the fundamental right to feel good in their bodies, peaceful in their minds, live colorful and rewarding lives, and be part of a caring community, no matter their background or ability. And so as a charity, we have to focus on specific issues, specifically ones in Hong Kong. And the key ones, I know that Hong Kong in the last 2 years has made a lot of headlines in media. It's a time of deep change and transformation in our society. And big change is usually never comfortable. But one thing is that in spite of all that change that's happening, is the forgotten communities. And the city's most vulnerable and the most forgotten are the people with disabilities and special needs. About 10% of our population has a disability, a special illness, or a chronic illness, and the prevalence is growing day by day. As a result of the events of the last 2 years, over 1/4 of our population, 25%, are under the poverty line. Hong Kong lacks accessible facilities, professionals, and services. The government is overburdened. The medical systems and the educational systems are overburdened simply because the demand is so high. There is not enough to serve people with disabilities and special needs. And as a result, the vulnerable people face increased exclusion, discrimination, abuse, isolation, loneliness, and helplessness. And we have seen this firsthand, simply because the demand is so high. But the governmental services are nothing like what you would get in the US, where you can have early intervention services for free 4 times a week. In Hong Kong, the wait list to go through the public system is up to 2 years. And families who have no money simply have to wait for 2 years. And you can imagine not doing anything. We spoke this morning about neuroplasticity and how it's so important to do something with early intervention. But for a family who's just waiting, you can see how that's going to affect the child in the long run. So we created YAMA to address these social issues and actually look at alternative ways to provide early intervention, and maybe look with a long-term view for the government to actually fund and support this on a long-term basis. The charity actually focuses on 3 core service areas: people with disabilities and special needs, people living in poverty, and people suffering from poor mental health. And we have programs across Hong Kong dealing with all these different things. But the one that I wanted to share was specifically a pilot program that brought yoga for the special child methodology into Hong Kong through our individual adaptive yoga therapy pilot program. So we started this program calling upon all the teachers in Hong Kong that had at least completed the Yoga for the Special Child 95-hour Part 1 training. The teachers had to be first aid certified, and they had to go through rigorous background checks, getting screened with the police department to make sure that they had no previous conviction. And what we did was we wanted to get some funding so that the teachers who were offering this to the most disadvantaged communities could be paid for their service and also sign a contract and stay committed throughout the program. And so as we did, we had to write a grant. And writing a grant is a whole science in itself. I could give a whole talk about that separately. So if any of you are in that space, please feel free to reach out to me and I can give you tips on how to write a grant so that you can get some funding if you want to bring a program out into your area. And so we conceived a pilot program, and obviously parameters of the grants, sometimes funders who are giving you money, they have certain requests and requirements. So we conceived a pilot program that offered yoga for the special child up to 10 children for 16 sessions. Ideally, we pitched to do it twice a week for 8 weeks. But what happened was that the families we reached out to simply didn't have the capacity. And this was right at the height of social distancing in Hong Kong, where it was very strict and only 2 people were allowed in a room at a time. And so we had to agree on once a week, which to a lot of our dismay, we wanted to actually have it more frequently, but we wanted to actually be able to see the children consistently and long-term because we didn't know what was going to happen over the next few weeks. The program was offered free of charge to families, but what we wanted to make sure was that most people, when they receive something for free, that they don't value it. And so we had to come up with a way. So we came up with the concept of a refundable deposit. And the deposit was enough to make a dent that it was a little bit expensive. But if they completed all the requirements of the program, they would get 100% of the deposit back. And in the sense that if they didn't complete 100% of the program, and they did at least enough, like 80 to 90%, we would give 50% of the deposit back. So this is the pilot program. We used a yoga therapy model to identify key objectives to enhance physical, social, and emotional well-being, which included gross motor planning, coordination and body awareness, improving behavior and concentration, enhancing mood and self-confidence, and encouraging social development. I think everybody here knows and doesn't need to be convinced that yoga for the special child was the perfect methodology to follow. With these objectives in mind, the students had to go through a before assessment and an after assessment. And part of the requirement from the grant was that the yoga for the special child practitioners could not do the assessments. It had to be by an independent third party with a medical background. So we engaged the services of a pediatrician. We were very, very lucky to meet a beautiful German woman called Dr. Annette Berg. And her husband came to Hong Kong to serve as the German consul general. And she didn't have a license to practice medicine in Hong Kong. And so she decided to commit to this pilot program, which was actually really a match made in heaven. And so we looked at validated assessment tools that was available through the medical community. And validated medical assessment tools sometimes are very limited because they don't measure the subtleties of what yoga brings. So the first one that Dr. Berg had suggested was called the Denver Developmental Screen Test. And it's actually a test that measures early intervention. It's a screening test that measures personal social development, fine motor and adaptive skills, language and gross motor skills from 0 to 6 years old. And you can see on this chart here, it's measured in months, right? So if you look at the top line and the bottom line, it's measured in months. And so it's up to the age of 6 years old, but with a lot of kids with especially more severe and profound disabilities and special needs, the developmental ages are actually below 6. And we wanted to actually test a little bit more and try and find a little bit more nuance with this. And so we came up with our own assessment, which was the student self-assessments. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I tested was students being able to self-assess how they were feeling. Now, all my team of Yoga for the Special Child practitioners and the parents and a lot of the carers and teachers, like school teachers, came back to us. And I got a lot of pushback on this to say, well, you can't get an accurate reading because how are the children going to know how their body is feeling? They're so disconnected with their body. I said, well, do you know what? It's 3 simple questions. We've got some visual cues. Why don't we ask them? How are you feeling? Good, so, or bad. And then over time, we can say, are you feeling between good and so, maybe between that? No matter the child's ability, no matter whether they were verbal or nonverbal, whether they had autism, ADHD, every single child was able to self-assess. In the beginning, they were very, what is this? What we had is, as you see the images, we actually blew up some of those images in like a really, really big visual. And we would follow the eyes of the students and ask them. And obviously the parents and the carers who were accompanying their children would verify, yes, they're low energy today. Or yeah, they're not a happy person today. Of course, you can see by their face if they're frustrated or unhappy. And we were able to use this, what we call the student assessment form, the SAF, before each class and after each class. And we incorporated it in the amount of time that we had with each child as a mindfulness exercise. Let's sit down, let's be comfortable. And now, why don't you feel? And so this actually relates to, Renata, your talk on polyvagal theory, where you're giving them an opportunity for interoception. Because a lot of the time, kids are kind of told what to do. They don't have control over their bodies. They don't have control over their environments. And so this is some sort of control we wanted to give back to the children before we started the intervention in the protocol. So we finished this last year. This was our big project of 2020 when most of the world was shut down. We had strict protocols in place where only 2 people were by law allowed in the same room at the same time. The teacher had to be fully masked. And although we tried to do student safeguarding, where the law is to actually safeguard a student with special needs, 2 adults from different spaces have to be in the same room. So how did we navigate the rule of yoga for the special child where parents actually shouldn't really be there because sometimes children don't perform their best when mom is around? So we put a curtain up or a screen where mom, and it was like a sheer screen. And then the child's back was facing the screen, but the parent could actually watch from a screen and hear everything that's going on. So we were actually able to fit in the law of only 2 people in a space. We had the social distancing, and we were able to follow the other law of student safeguarding. So it's all very tricky. But what we did find was some significant changes, especially for 4 children. And I'd like to quickly go through the research findings. So each of these lines here, as you see, represents a child. And if you actually look at the top 2 lines, it's actually 4 lines because there's 2 lines that overlap. So you see like a pink and a light purple, and then a light blue and a dark blue. So there's 9. Unfortunately, because of COVID, 1 child had to drop out of the program completely. But as you can see, most of these trends are either even or going up. Only 1 child is actually sloping downwards, showing a regression. The top lines, even though like on the chart, it's very, very slightly moving downwards, they're kind of linear trends based on averages. But really, statistically, all kids showed an improvement. Some of the children, their developmental milestones were already at the highest on the Denver Developmental Screen Test. And so there wasn't much movement there for 4. 4 showed significant improvement. And actually the one that's sloping downwards significantly just refused to cooperate at the final assessment. He was tired and cranky and having a bad day. So if you looked at personal social development, there was a great significant improvement across all the kids. The next one that also showed significant improvement was gross motor development. So if you look at the lines again, the one that's sloping downwards is the child that refused to cooperate. And then the 2 at the bottom that are actually at 0 are children with quadriplegic, spastic cerebral palsy. So they're, according to the Denver test, which was the medical test, it actually showed no difference. For fine motor, we didn't show any statistical difference with the yoga for the special child intervention, which it was quite a useful exercise to do. And except with the exception of, I think, 1, there was no improvement. And then also with language, maybe 1 had significant improvement in being able to express himself. But as you can see, for a lot of them, there's a lot of lines at the top that are overlapping each other. So most of the students were actually already at the top of their level of language development. But what we found was very significant were the student self-assessment forms before and after. And so if you see, these gray lines are kind of the average of all the students together before the class and after the class. And the blue line actually shows a trend of increasing awareness. As you can see, like before and after class, the lines are getting wider. And what we found that week to week to week, students were actually aware that they weren't feeling great in their bodies before coming to yoga. And this is something, again, that Renata was saying, that most kids are like tight. Even with Shivakami's talk this morning about with CP, the muscles are really tight and there's a lot of experience of pain. And then after the class, they would rate how they were feeling afterwards. And you can see that the widening gap shows that they were actually increasing in their body awareness. One of the things we weren't able to check were some of the things that we could actually see where we say, okay, now let's talk to your body. How is your foot feeling? Can you bring your full attention to your toes? And then you could see, even though a child couldn't move their body physically without assistance, the eyes would go to the foot. And so there you had an increase in body awareness, but the medical assessment, the validated medical assessment, wasn't testing it. So this was something that we were like, okay, no, something more needs to happen. And the same thing with energy levels. Here you actually can see that they started out having more energy before the class, and then their energy would be very low after the class. And this happened for the first 4 sessions in a row. And these are, again, averages. What we found was the agitation that students would come into, their nervous systems were in overdrive. And after doing yoga for the special child protocol, the methodology, they would be so relaxed. Now, when you're living in a high stress response, and then you have a relaxation response, the first thing your system is going to do is almost crash a little bit. It's going to dip a little bit. But after some time, it comes back into balance. And actually, with a calmer energy, they were feeling much more energized after the class. And so it wasn't a hyperactive energy, it was a calm, grounded energy. And this is what we were noticing across all the students. And then finally, the mood. Obviously, with their energy, their body feeling better, less pain, their nervous system more regulated, they were happier afterwards. And of course, you'd get some children that would come to class, they were just joyful all the time, happy, always 5, happy, score 5 and 5, 5 and 5, 5 and 5. And actually, some of the teachers were like, well, I don't actually know that this is an accurate student assessment, because they're always just saying that they're happy all the time. But then one day, this one child that was happy all the time got caught in the rain, and he comes in completely dripping wet and was like, I am unhappy. And so the teacher decided to stop doubting that the student knew to intuit how they were feeling. And so this is what we found. And then the teachers, the only thing that we allowed the teacher to do was to score the engagement of each of the kids. And so they gave them a score at the end of class from 1 to 5. 1 being the lowest, they were distracted and sensory seeking. Number 2 was they were partially distracted, but partially kind of checking the teacher out and observing. The 3rd was they weren't imitating, they were just completely absorbed by what the teacher was saying and observing, but not doing. The 4th was partially imitating, partially observing. And then 5th was, happy, engaged, imitating, or if they weren't at the imitative stage and they were still maybe induction or interactive, they were attempting. There was some sort of interaction, but full engagement. And so this is the average score across all 10 kids and across all the teachers' scorings. And you can see this linear trend of averages. There is an increasing score in student engagement. But what we also did was we allowed the students to rate the teachers, which was actually quite cool because they used the same 5-point scale as they would with the thumbs up, the so-so, and the thumbs down. And actually now in our 2nd year of doing this program, what we're finding is the student engagement and how the student rates the teacher are linked. So if the student gives the teacher a bad score, the teacher also gives the student a bad score, which is really interesting to see how connected student and teacher are. So what are the highlights of this? A short term, we called it a yoga therapy intervention because we had to use a yoga therapy research model, but it can yield positive physiological and psychological changes in children with special education needs. That's what CSEN stands for. And so the preliminary results show overall improvement in each child, specifically with personal social development and gross motor development, body awareness, mood, and engagement. What we found was the meditation practice at the beginning through mantras and sitting quiet, and at the end again, actually improved their engagement and their mood. And the structure and the repetition was so important for predictability, students knowing what to expect and feeling confident that they could engage in the yoga for the special child. The challenges that we had was actually COVID. At one point during this intervention, we were in full lockdown. And so it disrupted the continuity of programming for some children. Many kids are immunocompromised. And so parents were like, we're not going to leave the house. And for safety issues, we couldn't have our teachers traveling from household to household across different districts. So we had to be really strict. Another challenge was that the Denver Tooth medical assessment, it had its limitations in measuring development. And the assessments were dependent on the students' cooperation. The subtle improvements that we saw with the students were noticed by the pediatrician. Wow, the child is so much calmer. Wow, they seem so much more coordinated. But even though she was noticing it, the medical assessment tool was not tracking it. And what we came down to realize was right now in the medical world, there is no validated assessment tool that can track these developmental changes that everybody, parents, teachers, and a third-party medical professional were seeing. And so I'd like to share with you actually some of the anecdotal research that we found. One parent said, my son told me that yoga is the only time that the voices inside his head stop. Another parent said, my child is finally sleeping through the night after 6 years of never sleeping through the night. Another mom, Chinese mom on welfare, said, so I was watching through the curtain how the yoga teacher was teaching my son how to calm down. And I copied that technique at home and when we went out, and now we don't have meltdowns in public anymore, and I actually can take my son out. And then we got a call from a school teacher who said, what did you do to this boy? He's finally sitting, learning, and paying attention in class. And so these are anecdotal evidence that we've been seeing that's coming out in the community. And as a result of this pilot program, we were able to run the program again. We decided to reach more children with the budget that we had for year 2. So instead of 16 weeks, we brought it down to 10 weeks. And we said that it's not going to be strictly once a week. So the families that did have the capacity to do twice a week, we invited them to come and do twice a week. And as a result, we were able to see 30 kids instead of just 10. So we were able to triple the amount of children that we saw, because what we're hoping to do is come with some sort of cost-effective, larger reach. And the goal is to be able to move these kids through one-to-ones and into small group classes. So this pilot program that we did, 60% were able to move into small group classes. The statistics that we're getting now that we have an additional 30 kids, so that's 40 kids in total, about 50% can move through to group classes, which I think is quite significant considering it's only 10 yoga classes. It's only 10 yoga classes of one-to-one, and it's quite significant. And the parents and the families and the kids that we think it might be too disruptive to go into a group class, we invite them to come back to the one-to-ones and reapply. So I'd like to highlight one particular student, Marco. He's a young boy with autism, and he has gone through 100% the public system. And he is the Social Welfare Department of Hong Kong has these grown children. I call them grown children because he's 30 years old, and he's at what's called a sheltered workshop. And a sheltered workshop is like a day training center where they go in for the day and they do activities. And he was labeled as violent, angry, uncontrollable, always shouting. And the first time he came to YAMA Foundation, of course, he had no idea where he was going. He was yelling, he was picking up furniture and throwing it across the studio. And all the teachers that were in this space were a little bit afraid to work with him. So I came up to him, and with his mom helping me to translate because he didn't speak a word of English and my Chinese is not that great, I leveled with him, right? Use connection, heart to heart, and trust. trust that I knew he wasn't going to hurt me. And I told him who I was and why his mom brought him here. And notice that I can see that you're feeling really angry and upset. Your mom's taking you to somewhere where you don't know, and that's okay. But your mom brought you here because she thought you would feel better if you tried yoga. Do you even know what yoga is? Have you ever tried it? And in that connection, he, from that first class and that first sitting down and chanting Om, you could see that his entire energy completely transformed. And then when he wasn't angry and he wasn't throwing furniture, he stopped becoming a threat. And so Paxi, who is fluent in Cantonese, came and sat with me in all the classes so that she could see that he's actually just a gentle human being. And you could see that he had scratches on his arms up and down. And we taught him how to talk to his body, how to stop attacking himself. And he is now such a valued member of a small group class. So you can see the photo above is a small group class. And the photo below is a recent photo of him. He has got so much body awareness now. It is absolutely incredible. And so his mom said to us, he finally has found a place that totally accepts him for who he is. He feels seen and understood. Thanks to the dedication of YAMA teachers, he now has ways to help him control his anger. And for that, I will always be grateful. One of the additional assessments we did, which I didn't mention before, was that we asked kids to draw a person or draw a picture of themselves before and after the yoga intervention. And here's a picture of Marcos before and after. As you can see, he had his face, that was fine, but he had no awareness of his body, maybe his heart and his stomach. I think that's what those two squares indicate, was he was aware of his heart energy and his stomach. But actually, if you look at after, he was able to draw his chest, his belly button, his arms and hands, his pelvic region, and his legs, and the fact that he actually had a physical body. And this actually is really indicative of how aware he was. We also brought parents in to do workshops with them to regulate their nervous systems as well. And it's just a beautiful thing when we see that whole families are actually transformed from yoga for the special child. All of our teachers know that there's nothing to fix. We're not there to fix a person. It's just to accept and to love them for who they are. One of the things is using those 5 keys so that people can know that they can be in charge of their own well-being and their own quality of life. And all we do as teachers is guide the way. That's it. We just show them a different path of being. So that's my presentation. YAMA Foundation has a number of different programs that go beyond yoga for the special child. Last year has been, I think, one of the most exhausting years. Renata, I wish I had time to actually stop and study. I actually signed up to a lot of online courses thinking, oh, the world is shutting down. I can focus on me. But the work of YAMA actually stopped me doing a lot of teacher training, stopped all kind of my training, my teaching track, because there was so much need in the social sector. As Sri Ramaswamy said in the opening speech, the have and the have-nots, the gap is widening so fast. And one thing that we found that with COVID was there was a very prevalent and obvious disparity between the affluent and able-bodied communities and the ones who had poverty and disability and disadvantage in our community. And my phone was nonstop. We need help. I can't bring my child to school. My child is having meltdowns, and actually led me to doing all these side projects like the Oddbods project. And so that's why I've actually had to tell everybody in my yoga community space, you know what? I need to stop. I can't go on my trajectory. I can't do any trainings. I can't go with my own further education because the world is calling me for service and I have to be there. And so I'm grateful for the service because I wanted to share my journey with you so that if any of you are going in that journey, I'd be so happy to just share what we've learned, all the mistakes we made, so that when you go out and do it, you've got ammo and you've got somebody who's kind of walked that path before, so you can maybe do it better than we did. Thank you. Om Shanti. If you have any questions, I'd be so happy to answer those questions.
Thank you so much, Hersha. That was really nice. And if we think about the Bhagavad Gita, what that is a journey of learning more about yourself. And what best way to learn and grow than serving? So you did not stop your journey of learning. You're just learning a different way and in real life and learning bigger lessons and sharing with other people, and that is a very beautiful job. So you did not stop your learning journey, because for every child that we work with, sometimes we have to sit back home and say, okay, so what can I do to help that child? And your brain is so the teachings are inside of us. With the expression of those teachings is what you're doing, and that is amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Anyone
Renata.
has any questions? We have 7 minutes for questions. If you have any questions, or if you want to share anything, that will be okay as well. Emily, I was hoping you're going to talk. How are you? Oh, wait a second. Let me unmute you for you. Oh, we have a doctor here.
So that was amazing and beautiful. I completely loved it. I'm a developmental pediatrician and did my regular yoga teacher training and just completed my 95-hour yoga for special child in the summer, and have been thinking, I teach kids, but I haven't done as much yet with kids with cerebral palsy, and I haven't done as much. I haven't tried to do any formal assessments of the kids I teach, and I really loved a lot of the things. I love the visual analog systems that you're using, that the kids could pick out how they're feeling. I think we really, there's been a lot of work with using those for pain, and that's sort of the way that most people use pain, best practices for assessing pain in kids. But it's true that the finding good scales is very hard, and actually it's something that we really need to figure out something better to do. If you're interested in a motor scale, another one to think about for future studies is the PDCAT, which is, it can be done, it's designed for kids with CP, but you could use it for kids who had other, potentially use it for kids with other disabilities too. I think they've tested it in kids with Down syndrome. And the parents can answer questions themselves on an iPad, so it makes it pretty easy to administer. It takes a little more time. I think that the Denver it's nice because it's so easily available, but it's not really great for showing change, and the ceiling effect is a problem. So, but I would love to be in touch at some point offline too, because I think finding getting people to actually sort of, how do we show what we know? I mean, we can know that it makes a huge difference, but if we want to try to get funding for, it's amazing to get philanthropic funding, but really, if you could if a child can get so much better using this, it should be paid for by medical insurance. It should be covered as part of their therapy because it works.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I would love to actually connect offline to discuss this, because what we did is now we have an official research partner with an early intervention education center. And we're using other tools like the Vineland adaptive behavior scales. And then we've come up with our own set of questions that we administer together with the Denver test. And it's our own set of questions. And the researcher now, it's a new one. Her name is Dr. Yvonne Betcher. She is she's physio-occupational speech therapy. And she's so excited about the yoga therapy because she's like, this has never been researched. This has never been done before. We are doing something groundbreaking. And so I'd love to see the PDCAT as well. And once we, this year, we're actually testing our new assessment scale. It's not validated, but that's why we're doing it alongside a validated assessment. And then who knows? Then, if that becomes something that works, we can share it with everyone.
Yeah, and
thanks, Emily.
And the open-ended parent things are so important too, because you didn't even know to ask, how's your child sleeping? I mean, maybe you would have, but there's certain things that maybe we wouldn't have asked, but you find out, oh, it actually makes an impact on all these other areas.
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah, I'd like to know, is any of this going to be published anywhere? And will we have access to that information?
So at the end of, so we're finishing our second year now, which is the final set of 10 kids for 10 weeks. That's going to end, I think, November, December. So that's underway at the moment. And then once that happens, we're going to aggregate all the data from the pilot and then the 3 sets of 10 and look at also our new assessment scales. And once we put that together, we will be publishing it, but more in an infographic, and we'll be writing a report. I'm not sure because we don't have a control group. We're going to ask some other medical community to review it, but I don't think it's valid to put in a medical journal. I think it's not specific enough. The sample size is too small. There's no control group, even though the methodology is quite sound. It's really, really difficult. But what I will do is once we have published it on our end, I'd be very happy to share it with the whole community.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be good because people are always asking. And they say, do you have anything written down? And sometimes it does not necessarily need to be like medical validated, but just having some data and I say, I did this experiment, this happened. And that helps people to even find answers for their own questions. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes, especially the people who we're talking about, they just finished part 1 and they want to try to find more tools to be able to tell parents how this works. And I have a friend in Hong Kong. She did this study, so that would be very helpful. It would be very nice. So I appreciate your willingness to share that with us, Hersha.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you so very much. Like Dana said, that was lovely. I always love to hear Hersha talking. She is very, she is a spoken person and she really keeps our attention. So it was really nice again to hear you talking. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the beautiful practice this morning. I woke up super early with like nerves in my belly, like, I have to present. But
very gentle.
it was just what I needed. My nervous, I was able to climb back up the steps.
That is good. That is good. All right, guys. So we are gonna finish now, and we are coming back in a little bit for our closing chant. As you guys know, today is Divine Mother Day, so we are gonna be chanting mantras to the Divine Mother, closing that vibration, the beautiful opening we have, so we can close also with this beautiful Divine Mother's vibration. So I hope to see you guys in a little bit. Don't fall asleep, Laura. All right, my dear ones. Om Shanti.